Photoshop tutorial describing how to adjust locally the brightness of different parts of your image. I'm going to describe two techniques, and the first one is very simple, and it uses a black and white adjustment layer to control the luminosity. So open your image in Photoshop as normal, and then go to the icon which shows you the different adjustment layers, and then click on the black and white adjustment layer. And you'll notice obviously the image turns black and white, and you get the sliders for the different color channels to darken or brighten them. Before you do that, you need to adjust the blending mode on your layers panel, and instead of having it in the normal blend mode, you have to select the luminosity mode, and then as you can see the colors come back in your image, and you can go ahead and start adjusting the color channel sliders, and you will notice that the colors corresponding to the slider that you're adjusting will brighten or darken. This is a really easy way of being able to control just certain areas of your image which correspond to the colors on your color channels. So as you can see, the blues obviously tend to affect the skies. There's a lot of red light on this image because it was taken round about sunset, so the red channel affects quite a lot of the image, and the yellow colour channel tends to affect the foreground, which is mostly made up of reeds, and there is just a small green effect on the tops of the reeds at the other side of the water. Okay, that's the first simple method. I'm going to delete that effect now. I'm just going to delete that layer. The second technique is using a selective curves adjustment layer. So I'm going to start by going back down to my adjustment layers and choosing a curves adjustment layer, and you will get the curves graph, which obviously you can tweak and lighten and darken the whole image by pulling around the curve, and obviously you can put several points on it if you want to adjust the contrast. I'm just going to reset that to 0, so pull those points off and set it to normal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete this layer mask by pressing Control and just clicking delete layer mask. And now what you can do is make a highlight selection on your image by pressing Command and Alt on a Mac, or Control and Alt on a PC, and then the number 2. So it's Command or Control, Alt and 2. And you can see now that I've got a selection on my image which is showing me the highlights. If I now go to my layer mask and click on adding layer mask to my curves adjustment layer, it transfers that selection of the highlights onto my layer mask. So I can now click back on the curves icon, and any adjustment that I make to my curves adjustment layer is only happening to the highlights of the image. So that gives you quite a lot of control over the highlights and also the shadows, because if I just reset that to 0, click on my layer mask, and then in the little panel for the layer mask adjustments, click invert. I can now go back to and click on my curves icon, and if I make adjustments to my curves control now, it's only affecting the shadow areas. So this is really handy. You can play around at just selecting different parts of the image according to their brightness. So if I reset that, I'll just pull these little curve points off. I click back on my layer mask and click invert again. Click on my curves icon, then make some adjustments. You can see that that's now reverted back to adjusting the highlights. So to recap, with this technique, I created a curves adjustment layer, deleted the layer mask that comes with it, clicked on my image and pressed Alt, Command and number 2 to get a highlight selection, or Alt Control 2 on a PC to get a highlight selection. Then I created a new layer mask which automatically adopts that selection that you had on your image, and then when you make adjustments to the curves control, it only affects the highlights. And then if you click on the layer mask, you can press invert, and when you go back to the curves control, all the adjustments that you make are now made to the darker tones. And with the first technique, I added a black and white adjustment layer, set the blend mode to luminosity, and I could adjust the colour channels to adjust the various colour brightness or darkness.